Hello and welcome back to the Roundup by News of the Week, the show where I, Jake Whitwell, summarise and explain the news, helping you to stay informed. Give me a round of applause though, because last week I kind of forgot to include my sources. I won't do that this week. They'll be in the descriptions of the YouTube and Spotify episodes so you can hold me accountable. For the first time in a long time, like you might have seen earlier on a reel or a TikTok or a YouTube short, I am including non-political news in the roundup. So without further ado, I'll get on to this new and improved roundup. In news on Labour policy, The Independent covered criticism of the Renters' Bill with fears rules will drive out landlords and force up the cost for tenants. Criticism of the Renters' Bill comes around policies like the end of no-fault evictions and the restricting of what landlords can charge in advance of when rent's due. During the second reading of the bill, a part of the process where the bill is scrutinised, Baroness Scott, the Conservative Shadow Housing Minister, raised concerns centred around the time and the cost burden to landlords, which will make the position of non-professional landlords untenable. By doing this, landlords will be driven out of owning their properties and driven to sell their properties, which, because of a lack of supply, will make rent more expensive in her view. She also suggested Labour are rushing through the legislation without care for the repercussions. In the end, she also called the legislation counterproductive. Some laws tried to balance Scott's criticism, suggesting that it's a good thing that landlords might have to sell their properties because it could increase the owner-occupiers by allowing people that were previously renting to take up ownership of those properties, and it would also allow for more space for social renting and sort of rent-controlled areas. Labour peer Sharon Jane Taylor said the bill was greatly needed as reform of the private rent sector was so important. She criticised private rental as the least affordable, poorest quality and most insecure housing of all tenures, which creates a lot of insecurity for social renters. She said the 11 million renters and 2.3 million landlords are currently being failed by the frameworks currently in place, defending Labour's renters reform. The Guardian noted Labour is facing a defeat in a vote to ban green energy investments, which are tied to Uyghur exploitation. An amendment is being implemented to prevent GB Energy spending money on solar panels and other materials which have been linked or which have been made where there is evidence of modern slavery in the supply chains. 30 to 40% of polysilicon, a key material in creating solar panels, is made in, I'm going to butcher this, Xinjiang of China, where the Muslim Uyghur population has been detained and is subject to forced labour. This means the amendment would threaten the availability of polysilicon as a component, sort of scuppering Labour's clean energy plan. Despite this, there have been talks of a rebellion over an amendment in an attempt to force it through. It seems to have support of both the Tories and the Lib Dems. Across Brent support, along with the rebellion, makes it very, very likely that it will succeed. BBC News reported Red Wall MPs want tougher legislation on immigration. The Red Wall group represents seats in the Midlands and North of England, and it has requested a meeting with Keir Starmer. The meeting has two aims. One of them is over the investment in the North of England. It's challenging the idea that recent infrastructure projects like the Heathrow expansion and others actually benefit the North. It's saying it needs more North-specific investment, Northern-centric investment, in order to create growth in those areas. The second is on immigration, the second aim, where some members have the goal of making Labour stronger in immigration to try and counteract the tide of reform. The group's convener, MP Joe White, has called for the introduction of ID cards, for example, and that sort of exemplifies this stronger stance. The Independent detailed a minister suggested that votes at 16 could come in the coming months. Commons leader Lucy Powell has said she strongly supports votes at 16 and that she hopes that the MPs will be able to have their say on the issue in the next parliamentary session. Right. How long is a parliamentary session? It's usually a year. And although Labour's manifesto committed to votes at 16, the measure cannot be introduced until the next Parliament because it wasn't introduced in the King's speech, and it's unlikely other parties will push for it. Now, that doesn't mean it won't be coming at all. Lucy Powell is probably right that MPs will eventually get to express their opinions on the issue, but that this will come in about a year's time, probably. The Standard covered plans for the demolition of Grenfell Tower and a memorial which is to be built to the 72 victims of the fire. The government noted there's consensus around the Grenfell building being a sacred site, but it essentially said that there's not consensus on what needs to be done with it. There are proposals to take down some floors and leave other floors up. As a memorial to those who died and the victims of families who died in the tragedy. Deputy PM Angela Rayner said that this wouldn't be fair to leave some in memorial, which is significantly which is significant to some people, while tearing down floors that might be significant to other people. So the government has put plans in place to take down the entire building, with elements of it being taken down sensitively, behind wrapping as it currently sits, in order to preserve them for the memorial. As well as this, the government is supporting the Grenfell Tower Memorial Commission as the community designs a memorial for itself. However, the government has been criticised for not consulting the community properly. Grenfell United, a group which represents the families of victims and survivors, has said that ignoring the voices of the bereaved on the future of the site is disgraceful and unforgivable. Additionally, the Independent said one survivor has vowed to chain herself to the building if the government goes ahead with its plans. The Independent noted the government has denied talks with Caribbean nations over slave trade reparations. The FCDO, the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, has responded to reports it held talks with reparation commissions by calling the stories wrong and mendacious, or basically simply untrue. Despite this, Labour MP Belle Ribeiro Addy, who chairs the parliamentary group, the APPG, on African reparations, a cross-party group, has said that she was surprised by reports that there were reparation talks ongoing, but said it was a shame it's not going ahead. She then called on the UK to start a conversation over its past colonial role. On economic news, The Independent noted UK growth forecasts have been downgraded. The EY Item Club, a growth forecaster, has cut its predictions for the UK's growth rate this year from 1 point to 1%. This would only mean a 0.2% rise from the 0.8% growth we saw last year. This is a result of many issues in the UK, forecasted to stay throughout the next year. For example, the Consumer Price Index is forecasted to stay above 2%, and uncertainty as well as tax rises also play a role. However, real wages are set to increase, and so consumer confidence is expected to rise throughout the year. The Times detailed Britain's job cuts are at their fastest rate since the 2008 financial crash. The S&P Global Composite Purchasing Managers Index, the PMI, because that's a mouthful, measures activity across the private sector, and it found activity inched up to 50.6 points, up from 50.4 points, and that seems really small and really arbitrary. So this suggests the change was only minimal, and in any case it is only slightly above the 15-point line, which separates growth from contraction in the economy or in the private sector. According to Tim Moore, an expert who knows infinitely more than me about all this stuff and an economics director at S&P Global Composite, attributed this lack of growth to shrinking workloads and rising payroll costs, which are causing job cuts. These job cuts are at the fastest rate since the 2008 financial crash, if you exclude the COVID years where cuts were higher. Moving on to global news now, BBC News reported on new laws in Australia which bring mandatory jails for those who do Nazi salutes. After a series of anti-Semitic attacks in the country opened a conversation into the current terror laws, an amendment has been passed. These amendments mean hate symbols and terror offences will be met with mandatory jail terms of between 1 to 6 years. Financing terrorism will be met with sentences of 3 years, and planning to commit terror acts will be met with a mandatory sentence of 6 years in prison. They've been hailed as the toughest laws Australia has ever had on hate crimes. However, opposition parties in Australia have said the government party is merely caving into demands which go against its principles of being against mandatory jail terms. DW News detailed Ukraine has received fighter jets from both France and The Netherlands. Zelensky has confirmed Ukraine has received French Mirage fighters and Dutch F-16s as well. The exact amounts of the jets haven't been disclosed, but Zelensky has said this has allowed the Ukrainian Air Force to continue to develop. The Guardian noted Trump has doubled down on his Gaza takeover plan proposal despite there being bipartisan opposition to his claims. Trump has posted on his social media site Truth Social saying that Gaza will be handed over to America by Israel upon the conclusion of the war. Trump said in a post that Palestinians would be able to live in beautiful homes and they would have the chance to live safely and freely in a US-controlled Gaza. He said that there will be no need for US soldiers to be stationed in the region, but this came with criticism all over the political spectrum, with many behind MAGA saying they would not back the move. Aside from this, the White House has seemingly retreated from Trump's plans as well, which it emerged is not a plan at all really, as no feasible studies have been conducted by the Pentagon and no working groups or focus groups have been commissioned to examine the details. Also, no studies have been conducted to show how military presence might be needed to remove bombs from the area. So it seems Trump might have the beginnings of a plan, but not yet a plan in reality. Staying on sort of the American aspect of this, BBC News detailed dozens of countries have backed the ICC after Trump's sanctions. Trump placed sanctions on ICC staff this week after meeting with Netanyahu in Washington. He said the ICC infringes upon American sovereignty, as well as Israeli sovereignty. He also said both countries are thriving democracies which adhere to the rules of war. We don't know which workers of the ICC have been sanctioned yet, but there's thoughts it could include IT staff as well as technical staff who conduct research for the international body. The sanctions could include financial sanctions and visa sanctions as well, but we just don't know the detail yet. The UN has called for Trump's measure to be reversed, and Ursula von der Leyen of the EU has also condemned his sanctions. In total, 79 other countries have expressed their unwavering support for the ICC. These include the UK, Germany, and France. In other news, The Standard reported Starmer has denied breaking lockdown rules over a meeting with a voice coach during COVID. It emerged this week that Starmer met with a voice coach during the winter of 2020, and it has been alleged in doing so he broke lockdown rules. In response to these claims, the PM said he of course did not break lockdown rules, and criticism has been largely led from the Tory party, but the PM spokesperson did not comment on the issue. It seems the voice coach has been designated as a key worker, which means that the meeting was necessary and so was therefore not a breach of the rules. The Guardian noted a watchdog has found the government wasted nearly £100 million on plans to house asylum seekers. A Public Account Committee report found that the Home Office had a troubling culture which repeatedly wasted money after examining the acquisition of the £15.4 million HMP Northfire site to house asylum seekers. It reportedly was asbestos ridden, and that isn't the extent of waste. The department also spent £34 million on the Bibby Stockholm, which ended up not housing as many migrants as expected. It spent £60 million on a potential housing site at RAF Scampton, the former home of the Dam Busters, which was abandoned before it opened. £2.9 billion was spent on a site in North Yorkshire as well, and these cost increases come partly from safeguarding procedures for acquisitions being ignored. A spokesperson for the government has said that this was the previous government spending and that it does not relate to Keir Starmer's Labour government. The Times detailed a boss has admitted GB Energy will take nearly 20 years to create 1,000 jobs. I'm going to butcher his name. I should probably know it. But Jürgen Mayer has suggested positively that there is now a clear timescale for the creation of jobs by GB Energy. He estimated there will be 200 to 300 jobs by the end of the decade, and that the company is going to be around in 20 years as a British energy champion. At that point, it would then have 1,000 workers. at that point, it would then have 1,000 employees. This has been praised as a positive, or framed as a positive, just not by the Times. Sky News noted the SNP has been accused of building a luxury resort instead of a prison. Hold on, to be clear, they still built a prison. It's just a very expensive prison, which has been compared to a luxury resort. The SNP are building a prison which is behind schedule and reportedly include outdoor areas like gardens and orchards, as well as planting beds. Tory leader Russell Finley has criticised Swinney, the SNP leader, over the prison being a waste of money and a burden on the taxpayer. It is set to cost around £998.4 million, more than the £400 million it was supposed to cost in 2019. The project is also set to be delayed until 2028, I believe. The Telegraph covered comments from a polling expert, which said Rayner has denied Reform the chance to win. Has denied Reform its best chance of winning a local council. Angela Rayner has started a reorganisation of 9 failing local governments, which is believed will become new unitary authorities. This has resulted in the local government's elections being delayed while they were supposed to be held in May. Robert Hayward, a Tory peer and a leading elections analyst, has said that Thurrock Reform's would probably have been taken by Nigel Farage's party. Farage himself has criticised Labour's decision to delay, saying that there is no justification for cancelling the elections for 5.5 million people, given the local government reorganisation is set to take at least 3 years to complete. He also said he thought cancelling elections was something only dictators did, in an apparent jab at the government. In another name I'm going to butcher. We're covering Andrew Gwynne, I think Gwynne here, who it come out last night, was sacked over WhatsApp messages. This was reported, or the story I've selected was by The Independent. Andrew Gwynne, a Labour, that's how I'm going to go with this, a Labour MP and Health Minister, has been sacked and suspended by the Labour Party. In a WhatsApp chat called Trigger Me Timbers, which has more than a dozen members, including local councillors, party officials, and at least one other MP, he said he made anti-Semitic comments, and not only joked about one constituent being mowed down by a truck, but also that he hoped a 72-year-old woman would have croaked it after she complained about bin collection. A Labour spokesperson said the PM took swift action to uphold the high standards expected of a Labour Party member, and that there is an investigation taking place into the MP's conduct. Tory figures like the party's chairman Nigel Huddleston has said Mr. Gwynne's actions show a rot in the Labour Party and a contempt for pensioners. The now sacked MP said he deeply regrets his badly misjudged comments and apologised for any offence. Finally, we go on to a returning category for the roundup. Non-political news. Sky News reported on warnings of a dangerous climate breakdown as January was confirmed as the hottest on record ever. The European Copernicus Climate Service released figures which show average temperatures across the world were 1.7 degrees warmer than before the Industrial Revolution. This comes after a year where temperatures were repeatedly above the 1.5 globally agreed upon target to limit global warming, and experts have said this shows a dangerous climate breakdown. The USA Today covered the DC plane crash, with lawmakers saying that the helicopter had its tracking systems turned off. After a US Army helicopter clashed with an American Airlines jet last week and killed 67 people, it has come out that the Army helicopter had turned off its advanced surveillance systems. Texas Senator Ted Cruz said the helicopter was on a training exercise, and so there was no good reason for surveillance systems to be turned off. This is made more significant given the system has been praised for its accuracy and is the preferred system of use for American air traffic control. ITV News detailed trains have been cancelled after a car landed on the railway below a Salford roundabout. Trains between Liverpool and Manchester were stopped for an investigation to take place and for the car to be removed. The driver of the car was arrested for drink driving offences and has been taken to hospital for assessment. There were no other cars affected or involved in the crash. ITV News also noted an AI revolution could see 70% of computer-based jobs replaced. A report from the Institute for Public Policy, the IPPR, said jobs reliant on computer-based tasks like project management, marketing and admin support are likely to be reshaped by AI. It studied 22,000 common tasks performed by workers and found 70% of these can be carried out by AI, which would greatly affect the jobs of people in those industries. Along with this report, the think tank called for greater intervention on the issue, warning AI policy is currently too focused about the uptake and not concerned about the implications of the powerful AI technology. AFP News reported on a 24-hour PlayStation outage, saying there was a 24-hour outage over Friday night through to Saturday night, which affected gamers globally. It stopped them from accessing PlayStation services like online gameplay and multiplayer, as well as party chat. Sony had services back up and running and said sorry and apologised on an X post for any inconvenience caused, but they did not give any details as to why the outage occurred. So that concludes the news I've got for this week. Thank you very much for listening or watching the roundup. Please like and subscribe, as it helps me greatly in creating this every week for you. As always, feel free to check my sources and get in touch if you think I've reported anything wrong or if I've just overstepped the mark in some places. Other than that, I hope you found this entertaining and interesting. I'll see you next week. Bye.